female with a pattern of black and red that was made up of large patches of each color. She had wickedly barbed carapace and an intense stare. "Conquer the region, then expel the humans there." "I'm not going to fight my own people," Gareth said. "That's your people. All humans are my people. I'm radiant." "Our God will not accept a treaty," the Direform said, "without this land. Our people are tired of being herded into the mountains and unfertile regions. We must have more farmland." Behind her, the others hummed to a sharp rhythm indicating their agreement. Gareth sat down at the table, causing the three Ardents to stop writing. The Radiant, who didn't wear his armor but instead a simple tunic, put his hands to his head, sighing. "Do you want to return to the killing? You said your god was willing to listen and negotiate." "For this land," another one said from behind. "You have all of Muladesha," Gareth said, waving to the maps. "It includes swaths of farmland with perfect hills around Ayla. Isn't that enough?" "No," the singer said. "Our people in Silnaka cannot continue to survive in the highlands. We need not one singer kingdom, but three. Why are we confined to mountains and one stretch of land? We must thrive." "It's always been enough before," Gareth said. The singers just hummed to that, drawing anger spren. Finally, the Direform at the front spoke. "We are done for today." She withdrew with the others, leaving the pavilion. The enemy army beyond started to retreat, moving in war pairs as the listeners had once done, something he hadn't seen in previous eras. "Smaller numbers than modern militaries," Dalinar noted. "Judging by counts on the map." He'd always had a hunch that the numbers in old battle reports written by ancient scholars were inflated. He couldn't imagine hundreds of thousands of troops meeting on a battlefield in the days before modern logistics. After the singers had withdrawn, Radiants began to pull seats over to the table. Notably, Malishi, the bondsmith, continued to watch from the rear. Did he know he stood with two heralds, or did Nail and Kalak use aliases at this time? Navani and Gav waited quietly. Dalinar, however, pulled a seat over to the table himself. He didn't have time for quiet observation. According to his clock, he had barely over 2 days until his meeting with Odium. He had to find the answers to what had happened to Honor, and he was close. "Gareth," said a female Radiant with the colorings of an edge dancer on her clothing, "it might be time to give this up. They won't agree." "They will," Gareth said. "They're willing to talk. We merely have to find the right path. Please, give me more time." He put one hand on the table. Dalinar leaned forward. He'd been in meetings like this, trying to persuade everyone to follow a course he knew was right. He was used to resistance, complications. Yet here, one Radiant, then another, then a third put their hands out on top of Gareth's. "You've held us together," one of them said. "I didn't believe you could, but you did it." "We lost the tower, but we remained a people," the edge dancer said. "The Radiants support you." Dalinar hesitantly put his hand on top of the others. "They have their god, though," he said, trying to work it into the conversation. "The aggression she inspires worries me." "Agreed," said an Azish stone ward as they pulled their hands back. "But there is dissension among the singers because of it. That group that split off, we've been tracking them. They have abandoned all forms. They'd rather go without than bow to Mishram and the Unmade." "They made a mistake," Gareth said. "She's more reasonable than Odium ever was." "You don't know that," the edge dancer replied. "It's been thousands of years since anyone fought Odium." Gareth looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. Storms. He was hiding something. Was he meeting with the Unmade? In secret? Was he a traitor? "I'd feel better," Dalinar said tentatively, "if I knew more of what to expect from our side. regarding our god. Yes, well, Gareth said, honor won't meet with anyone other than Malishi. So unless he'll give us the gift of a little guidance for once... All eyes turned toward the bondsmith. The man met the stairs with a level one of his own. Honor does not interfere any longer. Our doings are ours alone. But you have spoken to him, Gareth said. He does not interfere, Malishi said, his arms folded. Gareth sighed, looking back to the others sitting at the table. Ardens were quietly rolling up maps, but otherwise there was silence, except for a gentle wind.
An enemy has been slain.
Are you there? Dalinar thought. Ancient God, are you still watching? He got a feeling, but no words. The ancient gods, the wind, the stone, the night, had less power in this time. They found it difficult to speak. We are close to lasting peace, Gareth said, blue fronds of sincerity spread unfolding around him. I promise you, we're closer to a treaty than we seem. They will betray it, Malishi said. They are the Voidbringers, destroyers. And what are we? Gareth snapped. We're all Voidbringers. Every time we pick up a spear or a blade and slaughter someone over this cursed land, we become Voidbringers. Singer or human, it's the same. That's the Void, Malishi. Watch us at the rim, the Stone Ward said. Someone must fight. Yes, Gareth said, standing, but we mustn't love it so much we abandon other options. This treaty will work. It must. Just give me time. You have it, the Edge Dancer said. But we can't keep at this forever. Gareth nodded, and the meeting began to disperse. Dalinar watched Gareth walk from the pavilion, where he was joined by a small group of other Windrunners. He glanced back at the pavilion, then took to the sky with his attendants. Follow, the wind said. Storms. He didn't have the powers to follow with wind running, but he had to find out what they were up to. Does anyone else worry about where he goes? Dalinar asked the others. He's always been like that, the Edge Dancer said. But he's led us well, Naze. You have to admit that. They began to break down the pavilion, and he saw Navani taking some of the notes from the Ardens and scanning them. Dalinar felt a building sense of foreboding. It was coming. The Recreance was here. He jumped as someone stepped up beside him. Malishi.
An enemy has been
Tonight
slain.
is the night,
An ally
Malishi
has
said.
been slain.
We know where he'll be. I hope it won't break the others when they realize Gareth is a traitor. Tonight? Dalinar said. Where? About an hour's walk from the keep, Malishi said. Same place as last time, though we were too late. Tonight we'll go early and watch. Your warnings in the past have been useful, Naze. But this must be done. Otherwise, Gareth will destroy us all. Are you in? Yes, Dalinar whispered, and a line of light burst into existence, tying him to Malishi. He pulled on the line of light, and the setting warped around him. In seconds, he was lying prone on the stone ground with Navani, Gav, Malishi, and several others, including Kalak. It was night, first moon, and they hid in a hollow in the ground near some trees, their bodies camouflaged beneath branches and fallen leaves.
An enemy has
The
been
landscape
slain.
here was made up of many towering rock formations, reminding him of the place where the heralds had abandoned their blades. Perhaps this was the same region,
Double kill.
with rocks like buildings forming many canyons, small trees lining a stream that ran past behind Dalinar. The lofty rock formations in front of him, 30 or 40 feet tall, surrounded a kind of natural glade or clearing. He didn't like this spot. He saw too many places for people to get around you, sneak up without being seen. But perhaps it was a good space for a clandestine meeting with shadows cast by moonlight. He took Navani's hand and mouthed sorry to her in apology for doing this so brashly, She nodded and took Gav by the hand. He seemed to be doing well, his head cocked as if he were listening to something. Storms, it couldn't actually be Elokar, could it? Lights in the sky. Windrunners, glowing with stormlight, landed together on the ground ahead among the rocks. Dalinar leaned forward and got a glare from Malishi, so he settled back again, not disturbing their cover. Gareth paced the stone, looking worried. Storms, that posture, that concern. This was a man working hard to hold too many things together, to keep the threads from unraveling, to keep a people united. I've known that feeling, Dalinar thought idly. I've been that man. But why meet with the enemy too? A moment later, Dalinar had shifted places. Quick as an eye blink, he was in Gareth's place in the vision. Damnation. He'd empathized too strongly with the man's plight and had accidentally activated his powers. Panicked, he looked around, trying to spot Navani. But the place where she and the others lay was well hidden. All he saw was a blanket of fallen leaves. Next to him, the other windrunners shifted, one glancing at the moon, checking the time. Gareth, one said, are you sure about this? Before Dalinar could reply, the sound of footsteps on stone drew their attention. A group of 3 singers emerged from the shadows. So Gareth was meeting with them in secret, and Malishi wanted proof of this, perhaps? Dalinar narrowed his eyes, but tried not to be aggressive or out of character. Gareth, whose place he had taken, had arranged this. Dalinar needed to play along. The dire-form female-in from the meeting stalked up to Gareth, her figure, like those of all dire forms, covered in sharp barbs of carapace. While the other windrunners backed away, Dalinar stood his ground. She came right up to him, standing a few inches taller than he was. She studied him, and her expression softened, her humming changing to a comforting rhythm. Then she bent forward, took Dalinar's head in her hands, and kissed him. 86. River of Light. I offer my most sincere apology for everything wrong I've done. I am glad we tried. I am sorry that I continue to be someone with whom a relationship is nearly impossible. Kaladin found himself at peace as he laid out his tools to make dinner. Twilight had arrived on the 7th day. He'd already acknowledged that he wouldn't make it back in time to see the contest. Now, though, he felt that truth rather than merely admitting it. With this came peace. For despite it all, everything he'd been through, the state he'd ended up in, the trauma he'd endured, a part of him had still assumed that he would be the champion Dalinar required. He'd believed deep down that he would return to Urithiru with the secrets of the Heralds, maybe even with Ishar, and save the day. Fight Odium's champion. Win. He left his vegetables set out on a cloth by the fire, then took a long breath and lay on the hillside to look up at the stars. He and the others, after flying and walking all day, were near the Dustbringer Monastery. It was never going to be me, he thought. It was always going to be Dalinar himself. I knew that. He reached over and pulled a rolled bundle from his pack, the cloak Dalinar had given him. It made for a nice pillow as he stared at the stars. After a short time, he got out his flute. Dinner could wait. He relaxed there and played it slowly, because he enjoyed the art of it, and he thought that manifested in his notes. In the sky above, his armor spren swirled about in patterns to the music. Syl eventually flew over, full-sized, and lay down next to him, glowing softly, staring into the sky as he played. He wasn't certain how long they remained there, because the softness of the grass seemed to invade his very being. Soft sound, soft, fuzzy minutes, soft ideas, offering quiet, pleasant companionship, soft company. He let the music trail off eventually and held the flute up, looking at it against the backdrop of stars. Still no echoing music coming back to me. You should be honored then, Syl said. She rolled closer to him, leaving her hair frazzled. The wind likes your songs, Kaladin. She carries them away to cherish. He smiled, flipping the flute in his hand, like doing a miniature kata. I can't believe how good you've become, she said. I'm not good. I'm merely not awful. After only 7 days. I only know one song, and that barely. One song in 7 days. She poked him. And it's a beautiful one that reminds me of the song of Roshar itself. Just let me compliment you, all right? All right, he said. Then he went back to playing. He played for the people he'd lost, to remember them. The songs felt more real as he thought about those people. Goshal, Dalit, Tien, Nalma, Teft, Maps, and a dozen other members of Bridge 4. Men of his squads alongside slaves whose faces he'd almost forgotten, but whose companionship he would always treasure. He worried that more of his friends might have died during this most recent fighting, though the span read had given no relevant news tonight. He played for them as well. A melancholy song, but not a painful one. With the song's help, he felt he could remember the fallen, but remarkably, not feel their loss was his fault. Nail ruined the moment by stomping past. I hate that song, he said. Why? Kaladin asked. Nail didn't reply. He tore into a pack and fished at a ration bar. Nail, Kaladin called as he stomped past again. Do heralds eat? Heralds can eat, he said. We hunger if we do not. These bodies of ours are highly invested, but they are not immortal. Only our souls are immortal. He turned to Kaladin, holding up the soul-cast ration bar. This is a perfect food. Those taste like rancid armor grease. They provide sustenance, are portable, and do not distract. Soul-cast jerky, congealed fats, dried nutrients. He ate it, no expression on his face. A soldier needs nothing more. Whatever. This wasn't a point Kaladin wanted to argue. Nail strode off, though as he did, Kaladin found Szeth settled on a rock nearby, watching. What? Kaladin said. I'm waiting, Szeth said softly, for some stew. Well, storms. Kaladin considered the deliberate way Szeth had said that after hearing Nail proclaim the virtues of ration bars. Then Kaladin hurriedly got to work, boiling water in his small pot, slicing vegetables, dropping them in. Kaladin wanted to prompt Szeth to speak, but something seemed to whisper to him in Wit's voice. This isn't the part where you talk. Just listen. I am caught between two choices, Szeth said. I can see the merits of both. Kaladin nodded and kept chopping. Yesterday, I did as Nail demanded, Szeth continued. I went in to kill and won the day, but only with Syl's help. Moss was a friend once. Now he is another corpse I must carry.
What is that? Let me see.
Kaladin nodded again. I hate this,
Let me see that.
Szeth said, but I have made promises,
that's your cutter?
oaths.
Oh,
I
that's
am
the
doing
monkey
good
cutter.
for this land. I can feel it.
Let me see
I
that.
should carry on,
see it.
regardless of the cost to me.
Okay.
Kaladin finished cutting his long roots. Then he played the flute while the stew simmered because Szeth asked him to, and because it annoyed Nail. Szeth stayed even when Nail came over to glower. The herald retreated again when Kaladin handed Szeth a bowl, and some of the man's pain appeared to melt off his face as he ate. Between bites, Szeth said, I would welcome your thoughts, Kaladin Stormblessed. The mythical power of stew. Kaladin smiled, taking a bite, and realized something. Back in Hearthstone, as a child, he had yearned to train in the spear and learn how to fight. Yet the best moments of his life and the most important connections he'd made hadn't come from his training in the spear. They had come from a different kind of training, done by his mother during those same early years when she taught him to peel long roots and boil vegetables.
Shut
Remarkable.
down.
What would Wit tell him to do here with Szeth? Tell a story, maybe. Kaladin didn't know any good ones, except the ones of his life. I knew this man once, Kaladin said. Goshal. He was a slave with me during some of the darkest days of my life. They wanted me to train them so they could revolt against their masters. They'd found out I'd been a fighting man. Yes, Szeth said, thoughtful. Slavery is nasty and barbaric. I would have fought back too.
Your team has destroyed a
Kaladin looked
turret.
up, surprised.
Shut down.
But I thought, I mean, you served for so long.
Your
I
turret has been
oathed
destroyed.
myself into my position, Szeth said. You were forced into it, weren't you? Betrayed? Kaladin put his fingers to his forehead, touching only the smooth skin where his tattoo was. No more scars, no more brands. Dangerous no longer? Yes, he said. That is a different thing entirely, Szeth said. Rebellion was against the law regardless of our reason for becoming slaves. Szeth grunted, then turned back to his stew.
Enemy double kill.
This wasn't the way Wit told stories.
Enemy rampage.
Kaladin felt awkward as he continued without feathered words. So, Goshal. He was a smaller fellow, Szeth. You'd have liked him. Quiet, determined. He served with precision, but had this fire in his eyes, like smoldering coals. He asked me to teach the others to fight. Thing is, he already knew. I saw it the moment he held a spear, though he tried to hide it. This floored me. I hadn't met many other slaves who had been soldiers. Szeth grunted. Too valuable?
An
Exactly,
ally has been
Kaladin
slain.
said. It takes a lot to force a trained soldier into common household slavery. Something unusual has to happen. Szeth paused, spoon halfway to his lips, waiting. Huh. It worked, even without the feathered words. And? Szeth asked. Goshal was worse than a deserter, Kaladin said. When I got his story out of him, I found a man who had deliberately disobeyed orders. He'd killed his commanding officer. That monster, Szeth whispered. Kaladin hesitated because he hadn't expected such a willing audience in Szeth. Yet the man watched him, eyes wide, even for him. He hasn't had years to get used to Wit, Kaladin thought. Or maybe he just isn't as cynical as I am. Probably the latter. Kaladin had always found himself thinking more about why Wit was telling him the story as opposed to just listening.
An ally has been slain.
There's a monster in this story, Kaladin said. Goshal's commanding officer ordered him to burn a village.
Double
Szeth
kill.
hesitated, then continued eating. Ah? Kaladin asked. I see why you tell me this story, Szeth said. You want me to think about the kinds of commands a soldier must disobey. Maybe they weren't so different. Sorry, I didn't mean to be that heavy-handed, but Szeth, it's true. Kaladin served himself a bowl. Goshal died in the rebellion I started. I blamed myself for quite a long time. You blamed yourself for surviving, didn't you? Kaladin nodded. It hurts to live, Szeth said with a nod, when you don't deserve it. So, you want me to disobey my orders, my oaths? I want you to consider giving something different a go, Kaladin said. You've tried what Nail wants of you. He took a bite of the stew and... Storms, it really was good this time, wasn't it? How is that working? For you, your emotions, your thoughts. Not well, Zeth whispered. Think about that, Kaladin said. I don't know if we'll be able to get out of this without more killing, but we can try. I'll help you. Zeth served himself a second bowl. I will consider. He walked away, watching the sky and eating as he strolled.
Shut down.
Strangely, a part of Kaladin panicked as Zeth walked away. Despite seeing how well the conversation had gone, Kaladin wanted to do more. In a way, Zeth's positive response made it worse, because the part of Kaladin that had always needed to help was stronger for people he liked.
Shut down.
He felt a sudden, powerful urge to leap from his seat, to run after the man, and insist they make a plan. Or worse, to make one without Zeth's knowledge. To protect him, save him, fight for him, do anything to keep the man from being hurt. He remembered a dead girl on a slab, a child he and his father had failed to save. A terrible pain echoed from that distant failure. No.
An enemy has been slain.
His instinct was good. It had led him to save Bridge 4 and himself. But he could now view it with more mature eyes. It was also dangerous, the same way water could still drown a dehydrated man. Storms. If he let this need to protect control him completely, he would never be able to help anyone. He'd break first. And so, carefully, he fought back. Zeth deserves to make his own choices, he thought. If I step in, I take that from him, and that's not who I want to be. If I don't control myself, I can't protect, can't help. If I let what Tien's death did to me happen again and again, I will break.
Shut down.
I can't keep a stranglehold on those I
An
love.
enemy has been slain.
And finally, most potent of all, I have to live for myself.
Double
Let
kill.
him go for now.
You have been
There was a
slain.
place for both Kaladin and Stormblessed. It wasn't so easy to do as to think it, of course. But today, Kaladin's anxiety retreated, particularly as he remembered the music. The calming, peaceful love of the song he'd played and its rhythms. Nothing magical, merely a contrast. Did something just change? Syl said, sitting next to him on the log. In our bond? I don't know, Kaladin said. I don't feel any different. I feel warmth and peace, Syl said, leaning against his shoulder, her hair blowing softly and tickling his cheek. That was well done with Zeth. Wit would have done better. Wit would have gotten himself stabbed. Maybe, Kaladin said, taking another bite. Wish you could taste this stew. It's kind of not terrible. She opened her mouth to say something, but was interrupted as a shimmering figure appeared by the fire. The shape of a man wearing a uniform, but really a black void filled with stars. Kaladin hadn't been aware Highspren could appear that way on this side. The figure flopped down. It said with a masculine voice. Hi. Hello. Hello, Kaladin replied. I would like to engage your services, the figure said, sitting cross-legged between Kaladin and the stew pot. Services? Whatever you're doing to help Zeth, the Spren said. Talking to him. Wit calls it therapy, Kaladin said with a grunt. Well, I want that. Please. You want help? Syl said. You're a Highspren. The figure slumped forward. Can I admit, he said softly, that I'm not a very good one? Kaladin and Syl shared a look. I know how it's supposed to go, the figure continued. The others showed me. Speak like this, commanding voice. Get the humans to do what you say. But it feels so wrong. I see him hurting, and it feels wrong. Is this your first time as a bonded Spren? Kaladin asked. Syl was glaring. She had a thing about Highspren. Yeah, the Spren said. We're supposed to take the oaths, you know. We're the only order where the Spren take the oaths, too. But I feel like I'm ruining everything for everyone. I don't feel like I'm helping, but I'm also making them all disappointed. Then, Kaladin asked, the other High Spren, particularly 121. Who? Kaladin asked.
Nail's Spren,
Syl whispered. He's one of the worst. Your names are numbers? Kaladin asked, frowning. Like cryptics? What? Both she and the High Spren said. It's nothing like that, the High Spren replied. Theirs are formulas. Ours are numbers.
that was honestly kind of racist.
Syl whispered to Kaladin. I'm sorry, Kaladin said, rubbing his forehead. No, I really am. I just don't know much about this. So your name is...
Your team has
12124, 12124 said. Is that how many of you there have been? No, it's just my name.
Rampage.
Syl rolled her eyes as if Kaladin had said something awkward again.
Your team
So,
has destroyed a turret.
12124, Kaladin said. You're on your first mission as a bonded Spren, and you're trying to help Szeth, but also to fulfill your order's expectations of you. Yes, 12124 said. But then you said we don't have to be what we are, you know? You said you're an anarchist. I did not say I'm an anarchist, Kaladin said. I'm simply reminding people that they have choices. 12124 leapt to his feet and started pacing, and it was somewhat hard to follow him in the darkness where his shape bled into the night. Those stars were visible, though, and provided a focal point to watch him. Curiously, they stayed stationary as he moved, as if he were a portal. Rule 1. I'm not a thing, 12124 said. Rule 2. I get to choose.
Rule 3,
Syl whispered. The High Spren stopped. I deserve to be happy. He turned to regard them. What if being happy means doing things differently from other Spren? You'll have to decide, Kaladin said, getting another spoonful of stew. You're supposed to give me the answers! You wanted my therapy, Kaladin said. This is how it goes. I don't give answers, I just give questions to think upon. Damnation. Wit, you crafty bastard. You just what? 12124 asked. I just listen, Kaladin said. That doesn't sound like much work, 12124 said, folding his arms. Maybe I should have joined the dissenters. The what? Kaladin said. The Spren looked away. I shouldn't have said that. Pretend I didn't. And please, give me at least some advice. Maybe, Kaladin said, if what you're doing isn't working, you should try something different. Talk to Szeth and see what he wants. His opinion should be relevant. And try not to be too hard on yourself, 12124. This is your first time. You'll make mistakes. Forgive yourself for them, then do better.